I don't know how to describe it other than like a demon type of sound.
But it's silhouetted, hulking, every bit of 5.5 feet wide, 13 to 14 foot tall, pitch black.
The one thing that ran through my mind when I had this encounter was I don't have a big enough gun.
Your host, two-time witness and field researcher for more than 40 years, William Jevning. Welcome to Creek Devil.
Hello everyone, welcome to Campfire Talk. This is where we sit around the fire, put our feet up with a cold drink, and let the conversation flow. Our good friend Adam sent Tom and I a picture, well actually it was a link this morning to, and I'm going to quote this here, so it's in Wiki Commons, and he says there's no history I can find on it, so I will, I'll post this on Facebook on the Jrdk Bigfoot research page, so I'll post the link on there, and then you can actually go to the link, and if you go to the link, it shows, there's this picture. It's a picture of a forest, and it looks like at the bottom center, in fact, they actually call it, sorry about that, folks. It says, featuring a forest with a humanoid ape visible near the bottom. It says originally this article had a copy of the Patterson footage, which was replaced with this because it was not CC compliant. So if you go down, and you could be fooled by this is a clear example. Now, whether it was intended to be a hoax or not, it's a clear example of what. Now, if this went out on Facebook, everybody'd be saying, oh, wow, look, there's a Bigfoot in the bottom center picture. But when you go down to where it says summary, there's description. There's the date. The date was 29 April 2020. And then source. If you go to source, there's actually 3 links there. The first link is pixabay.com, photos, forest, Finland, old vintage summer. That's the picture of the forest. And it's actually much clearer than what's in the, because it says here, no higher resolution available. Well, when you click on that, that gives you the original picture, and it's very good resolution. Then when you go down to the last link, it says www.flickr.com photos, and there's some other information. But you go on that, you click on that, and there's your image. Now, what the image is, if you scroll down, it says it's a Lucy model, Australopithecus afarensis, Smithsonian Museum of Natural History. It's a reconstruction of Lucy, an Australopithecus afarensis, a human ancestor, on display in the Hall of Human Origins. So what somebody did was they took this, it's a reconstruction of Lucy, and they placed it into this forest picture. I don't know, guys. I mean, you know, if you're able to go to it, and look at all those different things, it's you know, on the surface, you know, it could be construed as clever. It's clearly a con job, though.
Well, I'm just going to jump in here and say that when all of you guys were saying, oh, look, I can see that it's a, and of course I was looking at it on my phone, and I kept telling you, no, it looked like a bald eagle to me. It did not look human in any way, shape, or fashion. And then you sent me the picture. That's all I got was the picture, and then I noticed that you sent me the actual link to the Museum of Natural History. I got that later, but I told you that's a Australopithecus rendition of an Australopithecus. So I rest my case. I didn't think it was real. So anyway,
I was just throwing it out there. I mean, to demonstrate.
Oh no, I know why you were doing it, because you know the question that comes to mind, and it should come to all of our minds. Why in the heck do people do this kind of stuff?
Well, it shows how easily people are fooled.
Well, exactly. And even y'all, a couple of y'all were saying, oh, look, I can see the body. Well, yeah, you could. I couldn't see it as well as y'all did because, I was looking at it on my phone, and it really did. And even Milo made the comment a little later that it did look like he could see where I was thinking that it was a bald eagle, because the placement there is actually, there's a limb that comes across there, and it almost looks like this thing is sitting on the limb, not actually behind the. They didn't do a real good job of photoshopping it, to be honest with you. So, but I mean,
hey,
you got to wonder why do people do this kind of stuff?
Why do people do all sorts of things? I got a question for the entire team, and that is, what do you guys think in terms of this being a clear example of pareidolia? You see, seeing castles in the clouds and that sort of thing.
This is a little more than that, because there actually is a clear image there. But,
no, there is, but you can see it.
But what they've done,
your brain can interpret it in different ways.
But what they've done,
and I know where he's coming from, Will, because I was looking at it and saying, no, that's bald eagle. It's not anything in there, because and a lot of it had to do with the fact that I was looking at it on my phone. Had I had a computer that I probably could have brought it up more clearly, and it wouldn't have been so pixelated, I probably could have told. But even Milo remarked that he could see that it almost looks like there's a beak in there, in the way it's put in there. And then this limb, if you look in there, there's a limb that's coming across, and it almost looks like there's something is sitting on it. And I remarked that there was a deal on Monster Quest that some guy thought for sure that he had a Bigfoot on his game camera, and after they sent it to several photographic experts, they found out that it wasn't anything other than a blackbird that had triggered the camera. It was landing, and it was only like 10, 12 feet away from the camera, but it appeared, actually, with the forest in the background, it appeared like it was actually in the forest. So yes, Tom is right. Pareidolia can do a lot, to people. You look at some of these pictures that people get out there when you get the Sasquatch blobs.
Oh, so and Facebook is full of them. And then, and then you get a half a dozen or 20 or 30 people, which is really amazing, that'll go on there and comment. Now, I've seen this a lot lately, because I'll sit, while I'm waiting, having my coffee first thing in the morning, I'll just, to keep busy, I'll scroll through Facebook to see what's on there. And you see these pictures on there, there's absolutely nothing in those pictures. It might be of a forest. Oftentimes it's something they've blown up, zoomed in, which makes the entire thing blurry. And there's just nothing there. It's maybe shadows. But this picture, this thing is, and, people comment, oh, that's great. Thank you for posting. And wow, that's amazing. I saw the same thing. And I'm thinking, well, how many blank brains are there out there working? But this one is kind of clever, because, they posted this, they made it look, and the way they wrote it up, like it's, it looks very credible. And under the picture says no higher resolution available. Well, they were kind of dumb. They gave the links in the bottom, which tells you and it shows you that you have to dig a little bit sometimes, to find out the true history of something, instead of just jumping on it and saying, wow, this is, the real thing.
I think for a lot of it could have been just like, I wonder where they actually photoshopped it like that on purpose to see how many people would be fooled.
Possibly. Yeah, very possibly.
I mean, it's like, okay, because I just saw something on Facebook where this group, I forgot where it was, but everything was those structures.
Yeah.
And the whole thing with the structures was, it was barely big enough for a man to fit in there. And they had like 3 guys squished inside of it.
Well, we had Brett on yesterday, and Tom, you'll recall, he said he found a structure, and Chuck, you've seen them too, that are not big enough for the creature. So then you have to ask the question, if they create something like that, what's the whole idea behind it? Because it's obviously not a structure for them.
Not in the sense that we wouldn't think of it as a shelter for them.
And they don't necessarily need structure or shelters.
No, they don't. I don't think I've ever seen one of those teepee things here in Oregon. I'm just thinking.
I've never seen anything like that on the West Coast.
Yeah, I have seen some stuff that certainly look like it was large trees bent over and manipulated. So my position on that is I don't know.
I got it. You know what it is? It's like the bird box when you let, hey, we're going to build this and watch all these humans go in it.
What were you saying, Forrest?
I'm going to try to get a word in edgewise here. Chuck. Didn't you actually run into something like that in, I forget, Oklahoma or Texas, that actually you thought y'all saw something inside of it, a baby or something in the back of it?
Yes, it was actually on the Red River at over by Gainesville. We found he called it a hut yesterday, and I was going to ask him questions about that, but everybody was talking, and so I just kind of kept my cool. But the ones that I saw over there, and there was a bunch of us that saw it. There was one on the North Oklahoma side, and there was one on the Texas side as well, and they were both built the same way, and they looked like igloos. The shape was like an igloo, and all the sticks were just all over the top, or all over the structure itself, and the limbs were intertwined, and then on the very top of the structure was like evergreen branches that were placed on the top. And I've also seen the wood teepee looking structures as well in certain areas here in Oklahoma as well. So
Chuck,
we've seen several structures like that.
Two things in regards to that. Number one, we also had a guest on 2-3 years ago who had watched a Bigfoot attack and kill a moose. But he also saw one of those dome type, it was really small structures. Remember that, Will? And he said he could climb into it and you could sit there and watch things. Now, obviously, I think what Brett talked about yesterday was, don't know, it's just really, really small. So did a juvenile build it, or does it serve some purpose that we have yet to discover?
Jason sent pictures.
What its person.
You remember Jason in Arizona sent pictures of one too that was constructed like a day or two before he was out there, where he was finding hundreds and hundreds of footprints, and it was way too small. And I guess we can put that on the JRG Facebook page too, that picture. But even for small juveniles, it wouldn't serve as any kind of protection. So it must be a marking. If they're doing it, it's a marking of some kind. It's not a structure for cover. I mean, they don't need cover.
And Will, there's a term that you've used in the past, and Forrest you have too, and that's we tend to anthropomorphize. Mm-hmm. Hope I can pronounce that. And so we look at it and we put our own spin on, well, this obviously has to be a teepee. It's got to be some sort of a shelter. But what you just said, Will, is, it may have some other entirely different purpose, marking. Who knows? It's a buoy. It's a buoy in the woods.
So, the one that we found on the Oklahoma side, that structure definitely had something in it. We picked it up. I picked it up when I flashed my camera inside of it, caught eye shine on the picture, and one of the guys had a thermal imager, and there was something laying down inside of it that looked like, to us, it looked like a juvenile.
Well, here's something to think about too. Now, years ago, when we interviewed, I think it was Mike from Hanobia, one of the things he talked about was on occasion where there was a deer kill, they would have, and I'm trying to remember how he described it, but it wasn't like a full structure of any kind. It was something that was very simple, like a tripod almost, that they would make with branches, and they would place that over the kill. And then when humans found this, a very short time later, both the little structure and the kill was gone. So whether that was true or not, I don't know, but it's an interesting aspect of it.
Huh.
Now, it could be, if that was true, maybe they placed a marking over the kill so other creatures would know that was a Sasquatch kill. Don't touch it, or something like that. Almost part of a territorial behavior.
Wouldn't there be some kind of pungent smell or something then?
Not always. No. Most of the time they don't.
Okay.
Most of the time they don't have a smell. That's a big misconception.
Well, no, I don't mean. I mean the dead, whatever they buried or whatever they marked it with.
Well, if it's a fresh kill, it wouldn't.
Okay.
And I think that's what he was talking about in that case. These were fresh kills.
Yeah, primates don't do like bears or, bears actually bury their kills, and the reason they bury them is different from cougars. Cougars bury it and then come back usually shortly thereafter and feed on it again and until it's all gone. Whereas bears actually like to cultivate the maggots on there. I know that sounds gross, but they like to eat the maggots. So
yeah, like grubs and stuff, right?
The topping.
The topping. So they like those little squirmy things, and I mean, they're pretty. And bears are pretty nasty in their feeding habits. So I mean, they all eat everything that won't eat them. So anyway, but. Yeah, that's the reason they bury their stuff, because they won't come back to it, shortly thereafter. They'll wait 2 or 3 days until there's a pretty good maggot growth on whatever it is, and then, it's yum for them. So,
do any of you think that these creatures might, or know, or think, would they eat rotten meat, or something like that? I mean, I've wondered that. Do they eat just fresh kill, or
they eat garbage?
They go back and eat dead.
Well, they go through garbage.
Yeah, they eat garbage, so they'll eat just about anything.
I mean, if you're hungry humans will eat garbage. So
Mm-hmm.
I guess it just depends on how hungry you are.
Well, I've mentioned before, a number of times on shows that up here in Northern California, I was in an area where we'd find scat pretty often during the month of August, and one of the piles, I decided to take a stick and kind of, take it apart to see what the creature had been eating. And the clear plastic bags you get in the produce section of stores, there was one of those inside the poop. So it had eaten bag and everything. So they're not real picky about what they eat.
Ooh.
Well, I wonder if anybody's ever done a test on that poop to see what the parasite load on them is.
Not that I'm aware of.
Yeah, because the thing that kind of bothers me is that they eat, or at least just they've been reported that they will kill a bear and eat a bear.
Oh yeah.
And bears, I wouldn't touch bear meat with a 10-foot pole, but there's plenty of people in Alaska that I knew that did eat it.
Oh, I know people in Washington that eat it.
Oh, God.
Minnesota.
Trichinosis.
Man, they go after, they get all the grease they can from the cafeteria and just go bear hunting.
Yeah, well, I wouldn't touch it with a 10-foot pole because of trichinosis in them. And, that's something that they do carry. So, and you get that parasite in you, and it'll kill you.
It'll kill you. It'll kill you.
It will.
Forrest is happy that you're here, Milo.
Yeah, sure. You miss me, huh?
Yeah, I always miss you.
See, that sounded enthusiastic.
Nobody picks on me until Milo shows up.
Well,
I always wondered why bears were. Yeah. Okay. Well, that's interesting. That I never knew before.
Well, and again, going back to that wiki picture. I mean, wiki's kind of a dubious source of information anyway, but sometimes you could find a lot of good information there depending on the source and how it's put together. But I'm always curious about hoaxers and why they do things. I'd really like to get somebody on the show that's done hoaxing and have a conversation with them.
Mm-hmm.
You could call up Dyer and talk to him.
Well, there's a few others.
If he's not in jail.
Yeah, well, yeah, there's there's a great page on Facebook. It's the Bigfoot Hoaxers 2.0, and they'll out these people. And I think who were they going after recently? Mike, I don't know how you pronounce his name, Patterson, Sasquatch, Ontario. He was one that they were going after recently. So I know a lot of times it's for attention and stuff like that. That goes all the way back to Ray Wallace. And, Ray Wallace, he was, for people who don't know, Ray Wallace was he was the contractor who were building the roads, and they were doing some logging in Northern California, the Bluff Creek area, back in the late 50s and in the 60s. He would hire the crews that would go in there and build the roads and do some of that work. So when they started finding footprints in there in the late 50s, he wasn't around the area because, Al Hodgson told me that he was too busy to be there a lot. He was out getting more contracts all the time, and he would hire these, people with equipment and the workers to go in there and do the work. He wasn't there doing it himself. But when he found out about the footprints and things in there, he took a big interest in that and was hanging around with Bob Titmus. And he was really into it until, Renee DeHinden come along, with his smart aleck attitude, and he told me I was all of 26 at the time, and, thought I was big stuff. and so Ray Wallace and Bob Titmus, they were examining some scat, that was Bigfoot scat, and it was in an area where we find it today. I can go in there in late summer and I find this stuff. And, Renee comes strolling up and he says, that's horse bleep, and Renee told me, he says, I wasn't joking. I thought it really was scat from a horse. So it made those two guys really mad, and nobody would talk about scat anymore. But, Wallace kind of got edged out. So later on, he went to lengths to make these wooden feet, and he claimed that he was making the footprints in Bluff Creek. Well, it was because he was mad and he felt pushed out of the whole thing when he was like one of the first people in there. So you can kind of see how hoaxing began, but I don't think there wasn't any recorded examples of hoaxing prior to that. So, I don't know why anybody would do anything like that prior to that, and I understand his motivation for doing it, but people after him, they're trying to get attention or notoriety or what have you, I suppose.
One of the things that go ahead, Forrest.
Oh, I was just going to ask. I said, what did they ever do? I know he came out and said that he, faked those things, but did anybody ever, what'd they do after that? Well,
I think people kind of ignored him for the most part. And I've seen, there used to be a place, Miley, remember that road we drove on from Castle Rock, Washington, when you get off I-5 when we went to Mount St. Helens? And remember where that little gas station was? Well, that was changed. It's now, in fact, it's changed since I was there last. There was kind of a, had a little store, and then they had a display in there. And they had his wooden feet in there. Well, that he supposedly made these footprints with. And when you look at, and there's somebody did a good comparison. I have the picture somewhere of Ray Wallace's wooden feet compared to the footprints that were found for a decade from 1958 to 1967 in Bluff Creek. There were 6 Sasquatches that were identified in that area during that decade. Not one of those footprints matches Ray Wallace's wooden feet. Not one of them. So, and they were relatively small. They were, I don't know, they just didn't look like the Sasquatch tracks that were actually found and photographed and cast.
I've seen those ones of Ray Wallace, and they're obvious. He just cut them out. They're just, slabs of wood, sort of look like feet. That was it.
And he never explained how exactly they attached to his feet and all that stuff. I mean, there were a lot of questions he didn't or wasn't unable to answer. But, you know, so I mean, but that...
I wonder what the step and stride was. It probably wasn't anywhere near. But it should have been.
No, it was not something a man could do. They averaged, I believe, around 56 inches. Now, you got to remember, when people use stride, most often they use it incorrectly. And I've chronicled this in a couple of my books, you know, I try to explain it to people, but everybody wants to use the word stride. And what they're using when they use stride is the spacing between two consecutive footprints. That's actually step. And it's supposed to be measured either from one heel to the next heel, or from the end of the big toe to the end of the next big toe. That's the correct measurement. Stride is the arc swing of one leg. So you get a line of footprints, and you pick one, let's say a right foot, you go to the next right foot. And again, from heel to heel or toe to toe, and that's the correct measurement for stride. And you're supposed to average at least 3 of those to get the correct number. But what they were getting in Bluff Creek, they were measuring, you know, from the end of a toe to the heel, marking, you know, 2 consecutive footprints. And I think the average, Dehennon and Green said, was about 56 inches, which is pretty remarkable, actually.
I saw a thing on TV several years ago. They were talking about that guy, and some of his family were saying what he would do, he would strap them things to his feet and get somebody to pull him with a car so that he was having to take really long steps to stay behind. They showed a video of that, and they said that's how he did that.
You know,
that would leave car tracks there,
would leave car tracks, and there weren't car tracks. Plus, here's the thing. I questioned Rene Dehennon because, you know, I knew him for years. And I would question him periodically. You know, we'd sit around and talk for hours. You know, we'd go visit each other a couple times a year. And I can remember sitting and questioning him about footprints in the Bluff Creek area. And he would tell me. He said, for example, there was one place, and I've mentioned this before, where they were called by the, probably by Al Hodgson, you know, who was notified by one of the road crews of, you know, these fresh track finds. So it would take, you know, it takes a while for them guys to get from British Columbia, southern British Columbia, down to Northern California. And they were driving in those days. They did fly one time, but most of the time, you know, they'd drive down. So you're talking a couple days. And the road crews wouldn't stop working. You know, they had a job to do, and they had a schedule to be on. So they would inadvertently destroy, you know, many of the tracks. So when Dehennon got there on this one particular trip, the road crew people, they showed him where the tracks were. And even though they had destroyed most of the tracks that were on the roads they were building, there were other areas around these roads. And I think Renee was telling me there was an adjacent road, probably a skidder road that they had built that intersected with the main road. And he went and followed the tracks and counted them. And he said in one day he counted 997 tracks. This is after the road crew had destroyed most of them. And he said they were up steep embankments and down. They were places where, number one, you couldn't get a car to drag somebody running behind it with a rope. And he said, you know, the stride was so great. It was consistent. There was no, he said, number one, a man couldn't do it. And if a man tried to do it with some kind of, you know, feet strapped to his own feet, you would never get the spacing that he found on these tracks. And this was just one example of many.
Personally, I've never believed that guy, that Wallace guy, about him claiming to fake all of those. I just, you know, all of the things y'all have said just didn't add up to me. And I don't see how a board, which is not going to flex, could leave footprints like some of the casts that I saw on TV.
Oh.
You know, I don't see a board being able to do that.
I have copies of most of the casts that were made in that area during that decade. And like I said, not one of them match anything that Wallace made. In one case, too, now, if you were going to fake something, you'd want to do it in an area where it's being found, right? And Bluff Creek was kind of the focus of that. One of those footprints, one of the 15-inch tracks, one year, and I can't remember the year that Renee told me, or Green, one of the two told me, they found these footprints, and of course you could identify the individuals by their footprints. They were all different. One year they found them in Bluff Creek. The next year they found them 150 miles to the south. Well, again, going back to, if you're going to hoax something for attention, you'd want it to be in a place where people were going to look for footprints. You wouldn't go way off 150 miles to some place that nobody knew about. So you can kind of pick these hoaxers apart pretty easily if you really scrutinize it. Like the picture in Wiki that we just looked at. That was very easily taken apart.
And 150 miles, that's a really big stride, Will.
That's a little ways away.
That would be one of those giants.
one of the tusk guys, right?
Yeah. Oh, heavens.
Yeah, none of the footprints I've seen are in an area that you would think would be the public's going to go to. And if you're going to go to the effort of making a hoax like this, you need to get the benefit from it. You need to see the person.
Yeah, what's your payoff?
Yeah, what's the payoff exactly? Are they going to post it or something like that? I've never seen a footprint in an area that was you had to dig, figuratively speaking. You had to go into the deep woods and areas that were off trail. So, it doesn't make any sense.
You remember talking about my brother-in-law and I, we were down in the Bluff Creek area. Oh gosh, it must have been around 2005 or 2007. And I wanted to get some footprints, some good ones, some fresh ones. So we drove down there and spent a week there, and we weren't having a lot of luck. I think we were in the wrong area, but we were sitting around one evening, after we'd eaten, talking. And he says, well, exactly what do these footprints look like? So I know what to look for. So I described, what a footprint looked like and size and everything. And he says, I think I saw some of those. I said, where? Well, there's an area in the Puget Sound area in Washington. They've taken out a lot of the old railroad lines and made them walking and bike paths. They made them really nice. I mean, I think there's something like, I think my brother-in-law told me 126 miles worth of these. And, they blacktopped them, taken the tracks and everything out, blacktopped them. Really nice places, beautiful areas. And, in fact, I used to walk a section of it myself for several years. And he was out riding his bike because he's an athlete. And, he was out riding his bike on this trail, and he'd do a 25-mile circuit. And he was riding along, and he stopped, and he said there was what he assumed was a father with a couple of young kids, and they were kind of playing around this area that had water in it. Now, this is next to a creek. And in fact, I learned to fish in that creek when I was a young boy, near the Carbon River. And he thought it was just this footprint. He saw one footprint in the mud, and he thought it was from this man. And I said, well, how big? Show me how big it was with your hands. And he showed me. I said, well, do you think a man's got a foot that big? And he says, well, no. So we were scheduled to go back home the next day. So we drove up there, and I said, take me out there and show me where this was. So we drove out there, and sure enough, here's this footprint in the mud that's the same size as the Patterson Sasquatch. It was just over 14 inches. And I said, well, there's no man out here barefoot in this spot. And it was kind of an ugly spot. And it was funny. It was right near where a lot of people would pass. Nobody paid any attention to it. And it was, it was in the ground a couple inches and real nice print. Even though it was older, it was probably a month old by the time I got to it. It was still in decent condition. So I started searching the area. And it wasn't obvious where the trail went, but I kind of made an assumption based on the direction of the orientation of the foot. And I ended up finding an area back in the woods. It was just covered with these footprints. I counted more than 100 tracks back there. And it wasn't a straight line. It kind of had meandered back and forth all over the place. So I quit counting at around 100 because the brush was way too thick to get off into. So I just stopped and, figured that was a pretty legitimate find. And it had a history, that area, which continues today.
Can I ask a question, Will?
Yeah.
In 1980, after Mount St. Helens erupted, Now, I know there's been a lot throughout history that I've read about that went on around Mount St. Helens, before it erupted. There's actually two questions. The area where Ape Canyon was, did that get affected by the eruption? And the second one is, does anybody ever find any tracks, after the eruption? Was there a lot of activity found around there afterwards?
Well, first of all, now Milo and I were there in 1976, up at the head of Ape Canyon, where we camped, and that was based on after I met John Green and Renee Hinden the first time. This college student in Portland called me, and he's thinking about all the crap that we did there. And I noted that in my book, In Search of the Unknown. I kind of told most of the story, not all the story, because some of that's kind of unpalatable for young minds, we'll say. Yeah, but anyway, this college student, he was doing a paper, and I don't recall what college he was going to, but he was given my number by Green because he wanted to interview a couple of witnesses who'd actually seen Sasquatches for this paper. So I told him what I saw and everything. And he says, have you ever been to where the cabin was that the miners were attacked in 1924? And I said, no. I mean, I'd gone hunting with my dad and uncle down there, but on the west side of the mountain a couple of times. And where that is on the eastern side. There's actually a shelf there that's called the Plains of Abraham. And so we went there, in 76, and we did find tracks that time. But as far as the mountain erupting, the blast mostly went north. So where Ape Canyon is, I don't think was affected as much as the northern side. So it's still there. As far as tracks after the mountain blew, I don't think immediately after. It was a few years later. When the wildlife started returning to that area, and it actually, the vegetation grew back much faster than they thought it would. So,
all the mud flows.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
But there wasn't anything for a few years, or until a few years after, and it was mostly to the east. Now there used to be a lot of.
Now it didn't get affected at all, did it?
What's that?
The eastern side, it didn't get affected very much at all, did it?
Not a whole lot.
No.
Not a whole lot. It was mostly north where the blast went.
Yeah, that is somewhere I'd like to visit one day.
The east got ash.
It got some ash, sure.
Yeah. Night turned to day, or day turned to night, rather. And they got some ash, but
we were in
that direction.
We were in Yakima, and it turned noon into midnight.
Oh yeah, we were there. We'd been there for a couple of weeks in the field in Yakima, and I got the word that we were heading back to Fort Lewis that morning, May 18th. So I told the guys to get their stuff together and get on the helicopters. We're heading out. So we had just taken off. We were in the air. I don't think any more than 15, 20 minutes. And one of the pilots, and it looked like clouds to the west. I'm thinking, crap, it's raining back at Lewis. I'm calculating in my mind as a squad leader, as the NCO, you gotta get all your stuff cleaned and put away and all this stuff before you get to go home. So you're talking about a full day of work before you get to go home and get showered. And I was grubby, living in a dang hole for 2 weeks and not happy camper. So I'd been armored cavalry before I went to Fort Lewis, so we were used to being really clean all the time. In fact, when I was on a tank crew, our tank commander wouldn't even let us wear our boots inside the tank. You could tell what tank we were in because there was the ring on the outside, and all of our boots were hanging upside down in that damn ring because he wouldn't let us wear them inside the tank. So when we went to Yakima, my platoon sergeant, he says, "Oh yeah, you guys are going to dig foxholes." And I'm thinking, do what? What are you talking about? You speaking English to me? I don't understand this. So I told a couple of guys, I said, well, dig your hole bigger because I'm bunking with you. So we got a call that day, and they said, get on the helicopters, we're heading back. And I'm thinking, thank goodness. And we're in the air, and the pilot, he comes across and he says, hey, Sarge, you know what that is? And I'm thinking, I said, yeah, it's misery. Because it looked like a cloud bank, and I'm thinking it's going to be raining. Everything is going to turn to mud when we get off the helicopters. It's just going to be, I wasn't looking forward to any, and he knew what I was thinking. He chuckled. He says, no, that's the ash cloud heading our way from St. Helens. It erupted just a short time ago. So they rerouted us north to avoid the cloud to get back to Lewis. And I guess you were there too, Milo, weren't you, in Yakima?
I was, yeah. Well, we were still out in the field because we had gun jeeps.
You got stuck there.
And we got stuck there. And everybody's like, what is that? I said, I think Seattle got nuked. I was like,
yeah, Milo and I got called on alert every time it erupted that summer. Remember, we were at my parents' house one time, and my parents got a call. They were looking for me, and I said, well, dude, you better come too. We're all gonna be on alert. So,
well, we were right next door to each other, so
yeah, our units were right next to each other.
We could throw rocks at each other.
Yeah, there was the two barracks buildings, and then there was an aid station in between us. That was it. I don't know how we managed to get stationed that close to each other, but
yeah, it was cool. But yeah, we would go out on the Chinooks and stuff, and they would ask, go out looking for survivors and all kinds of stuff. It was weird.
Yeah, that's what all of our helicopters were doing too. They gave the National Guard credit, but it was actually the active duty guys from Fort Lewis that were doing all that work. I have another story too where they gave the Army credit for something they didn't do.
The National Guard or the Army?
Well, these were regulars. I was back in 1990. Me and a couple buddies were out adventuring one summer, and we ran out of money. So one of the guys' grandparents said, "Hey, why don't you guys go down to the unemployment office and sign up to fight forest fire? It pays well." So we went down there and didn't think we'd hear anything. But when we drove back to Vancouver, we got a call from the Forest Service. They said, "Hey, you guys are going to the fire academy. You need to be here tomorrow morning." So we turned around and drove right back and went through the fire academy. And then the night we graduated, they said, well, you'll get a call when a fire happens. Well, I think about 4:30 that next morning, we were sleeping and we all got woke up, and there was a big fire near Burns, Oregon, and it was 86,000 acres. So there were 6,000 of us firefighters in the base camp. It was huge. And they brought 1,500 troops from Fort Lewis. Well, all they did was, I think they were road control, because they'd grabbed all the school buses from all the school districts they could find. I mean, there were hundreds and hundreds of these school buses to transport us, to and from the fire area where we were working 12-hour shifts. But in the papers, and then, they had banners all over town, welcoming the soldiers and giving them all this credit. Well, all they were doing was directing traffic at road intersections. We were the ones out on the fire. We thought, oh, gee, how nice that is. They get the credit. We're doing the work. But there wasn't any Bigfoot activity down there, I can tell you that. I was the incident commander found out that I was an ex-scout, so he thought he must have been ex-military, because he's like, oh, I got a job for you. I got to go out with a couple guys and recon the leading edges of the fire and report that in where it was moving. It was kind of a cool job, but I had half the fire team that I was in charge of, and I had to manage those people and then go do this also. But anyhow, that was just a little side trip.
Well, I have a question, not exactly related to Bigfoot, but to when somebody gets lost and there's a SAR team, or it's not a SAR, but a rescue team, helicopter rescue team on Mount Hood. Would you know if is that National Guard or is that regular Army that does that?
I think a lot of times that's National Guard. Don't you think, Milo?
Yeah, I
don't think the regulars do a lot of that kind of stuff.
That'd be the state getting involved in that.
Yeah, most likely.
Yeah, that's more state, I think. That for the Army to do it, it'd have to be a national disaster like Mount St. Helens and flood stuff.
Yeah,
but it's always the National Guard that gets called first, no matter what it is.
Yeah.
For that.
Now, I do remember something that happened after I got out of the regular Army. I served 4 years in the National Guard after I got out. The Chattahoochee River, which flows, on the border between Georgia and Alabama, which is, flows right beside my hometown. There were some guys from somewhere. There were 4 of them. There was one man and 3 I think they were about 15-year-old boys, decided they were going to float from West Point, Georgia, down to Columbus, Georgia. Well, there are several dams between there, and a lot of them are what they call low-head dams. You know, the water just flows over it, you know, where the old textile mills used to get their power from. Well, these guys went over one of those dams, and 3 of them were missing. One of the boys, somebody had found him the next day on an island. He couldn't get across, you know. Well, after about 2 weeks, they got us, my National Guard unit. They called us up and said they needed some volunteers to go help search for those guys that were still missing.
After 2 weeks?
Yeah. It took about 2 months before they found the last one.
Wow.
Yeah, he was several miles downstream, almost at the next dam. But they got us to meet up at the armory, and they drove us over to the local airport. But they had helicopters that come in from Fort Benning. They were regular Army, but they're the ones that we rode around on for about 2 weeks looking for those guys, you know, flying up and down the riverbank.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
You know.
When were you in? Was it Hueys or Blackhawks?
Most time it was Hueys, but they did have Black Hawks several times. It'd be different pilots just about every day.
Getting their flight time in.
That's weird. Yeah. I miss the Hueys because the Hueys, you could stand on the skids and jump out.
Oh, yeah.
You know? Man, the Blackhawk did say, hey, you need to pop out on that.
Yeah, they also would come get us to do drug eradication flights. You know, what we would do, they would pick us up at the airport. Now, these guys were National Guard helicopter pilots. But they would pick us up at the airport, and we would fly to whatever part of Alabama they were going to be searching around. And they would have police departments and sheriff's deputies and people on the ground. And we would just fly real low over the woods back and forth, just looking to see if we could find trails or, you know, pot and soil bags, just, you know, anything that looked out of place, you know. And then they would walk in on foot and investigate it, you know. And sometimes we found some pretty big marijuana fields out there too, you know. But yeah, that was the state that did that. It was all National Guard, even the pilots.
So let's get back to hoaxing, guys. Chuck, have you heard of anybody hoaxing or anything in Oklahoma? I mean, you're kind of our guy there. I'm not real familiar with a lot of what's going on there.
Yeah, it's been a couple of years ago. There was a guy that was involved in some hoaxing, and there was a time when this one individual, I'm not going to mention no names or anything, but he had made it looked like a dream catcher out of reeds and set it in the middle of the road and proclaimed that Bigfoot had made it.
You ever hear what the reasoning was for doing all that, or?
For attention, I think, pretty much.
I have a picture from, I think it's from Georgia. We used to have a guy that was working with us there, and he seemed pretty credible. I mean, we had him on the show a few times and everything, but he sent me a picture one time, and it looks like, and I'm just kind of trying to image because I don't want to go digging through the pictures right now. I have way too many to go through to find this, but it looks like there's some kind of, I want to say bark, that's like woven between a couple of these trees. And I'm thinking, well, I always think when I see something that's purportedly done by Bigfoot, number one, what's the function and purpose? And second, I have to think, okay, you know, I've got a hand cast. These guys have, you know, short fingers and they're kind of big and thick. You need a lot of dexterity to be able to do some of these things. And when I look at these hands, I'm thinking they just don't have that kind of dexterity, not like humans. And especially, and you know, I know from my psych courses at WSU, which were mostly neurobiology, when it comes to our using our thumb, it requires a special part of our brain to function that thumb the way it does. It's not That's why, you know, other primates don't have the same dexterity that humans do. They have the same tools. They just don't have the same part of the brain that does that, that operates that. So I'm thinking, you know, I can't say for 100% certain it's fake, but part of me says I kind of doubt it.
Right. Well, I knew a guy that was in, also, this one just came to mind too. I knew a guy that used to go out into an area that we had done some investigations on before, and he started making videos and spending a lot of time out there. And there was one particular time, and he posted this on Facebook, and he found there was a tree out there that had like, you know how sometimes you get fungus on the side of a tree and it kind of clumps out from the tree a little bit. Well, he made a video he took a video of that tree from kind of from a distance, and said that it was a juvenile that was standing there by the tree. And of course, when he threw it out there on Facebook, he got all kinds of heat saying, you know, that this was just mold on the tree, you know, and there was a couple of people that kind of questioned him about it and told him, well, he needed to go back out to the same spot and record it again. And supposedly he went back out there and took another video, but it was from a whole different area. The tree looked pretty familiar, but it wasn't the same tree, and it wasn't the same spot. And he lost all credibility for that. I mean, I think he's gotten away from the subject and doesn't even participate anymore. But you know, that stuff goes on, and people try to throw that stuff out there. And you know, in his instance, he was just trying to get some notoriety and become somebody, I guess. And of course, he got caught by a bunch of people with the video that he put out there and said it was a juvenile. But you know, that stuff happens.
Yeah, it always gets me how much of this stuff I see on Facebook. And I know, you know, Facebook is just a place for people to do whatever, but you know, they get a lot of people seeing this stuff, and some of it is just obvious nonsense, and they get all kinds of support. So I don't know if it's done on purpose to muddy the waters in this topic, or if these people actually believe this stuff. I'm sure some of them actually do believe this stuff, but they get people commenting that, oh, well, that's such a great picture. I've seen the same thing, and on and on and on. I'm thinking, you people got a couple of screws loose.
You know,
I think
what I've learned over the past several years, my wife is really big into Photoshop. I mean, she takes old photographs and, you know, she can restore them back to, you know, beautiful. And she's got all kind of software on the computer. She's got a special printer. You know, I don't know if I'd trust just a photograph of one now because of the things that she can do with her photograph. I mean, she photoshopped my face onto Neil Armstrong's body wearing his spacesuit, and even photoshopped my name on the uniform.
Oh,
on
no.
The spacesuit. So, and it really looks like I'm standing there wearing that spacesuit.
Well, that's kind of the thing. I mean, if you had, let's say, you know, old-fashioned, you know, film picture where you had the negative and everything, now you'd still might be able to say, well, what's in the picture is hoaxed, but you could prove whether or not the photograph was hoaxed. And then you'd have to go beyond that, of course, you know, to try to, like everybody's done for, you know, more than 50 years now with the Patterson film. You know, what's on the film, you know, the film was legit. It's not hoaxed. And people would say, oh, well, it's because it's, you know, it's not the original copy. And, well, the original copy was around for a long time. And then a lot of these copies out there now, like the stuff that M.K. Davis does, you know, he claimed. And I'm playing, and actually, folks, Monday, I thought it was appropriate to redo the Bill Munns interview we did 3 years ago. So this coming Monday, the first part of that interview is going to be posted for everybody to listen to what Bill has to say about that, because he did a lot of work with the film. And then the following Monday will be part 2. But yeah, it's, you know, that's another whole can of worms. Then you have to find out, okay, what are these people doing this for? That's always interesting to me, is what's the motivation for doing this? Oh, I forgot I was going to say something about MK Davis, and Bill brings it up because he says he was looking at, Davis was looking at, I don't know, second, third, fourth, whatever generation of the film, and each generation of the film or copy, artifacts can get into it. Like at one point, it looks like one of the creature's thumbs is protruding out of its, because it's walking with its fingers curled. And in one picture or one frame, it looks like the thumb is out. And it's actually not. That was an artifact caused by these copies.
Yeah, and I might say that when I have made comments about Bigfoot being an enigma, having primitive features, ape-like features, and then some human-type features, the curved hand is actually a prominent ape and monkey thing. It exists in them, not in us.
And when you see handprints, and I've got pictures of quite a few of them, plus a hand cast, the hand on kind of the basic level, if you take a glance at it, it might look humanish, but the features are much more ape-like. The palm of the hand is longer, the fingers are shorter, the thumb sits much lower on the hand than it does in humans.
Yeah, that's what I was just getting ready to say. The hand, when you were talking about the dexterity, I didn't get a chance to jump in there, but that the thumb is set I can't talk, set farther down on the actual the hand,
right,
than what ours is, and so the placement's different. It's as is the big toe. I mean, they have literally an opposable big toe. So, and sometimes you do see that in some of the Bigfoot prints. That there's almost, it looks like that might have an opposable toe, but the majority of them are in line like ours. But that mid-tarsal break appears in there quite often. So I think that we have, it could be a different species of Bigfoot that's producing some of those prints. And then it could be just the fact that we might have some of them out there that have retained more archaic features that just haven't disappeared. They might have not have progressed as fast as another particular group. So
I guess it depends.
It's hard to say.
I guess it depends on how useful those traits are in whatever area they're living in. It might be real useful in one region, and in the next region, it's not useful. So they evolved away from that.
Yeah. Well, that's entirely possible too. But I don't know if there's ever been a study done.
No.
Of I mean, having the opposable big toe is a feature that assists in arboreal, climbing trees and being in trees. And of course, I have said over and over, I think that people need to start looking up rather than just necessarily on the ground. We're probably walking around out there. They're sitting up in the trees laughing at each other like, oh, look at the humans. They're looking for us. They'll never find us. I think that there's a lot, they're a lot more arboreal than what we think they are. So, that's just my opinion.
Go ahead, Chuck.
The thumb's kind of offset too, isn't it?
What's that?
I'm sorry.
The thumb is kind of offset a little bit, isn't it?
Oh, yeah.
Well, that's what we were saying. Yeah, it's actually set farther down on the palm.
That's what I thought y'all were talking about, and I was just making sure.
Well,
and then there's a curvature to the hand in apes and monkeys that you don't have in humans.
Yeah, and we see that with a lot of the handprints.
Yeah.
Well, guys, we're running short on time. Let's go around the table or go around the fire and get any last comments. Forrest, we'll start with you.
Well, and we kind of got off on another subject. I was actually going to tell you something that about what had been happening around here, but we can save that for another time. So.
No, go ahead and tell us while we're here.
Oh God! Well, I've been keeping a ledger here because everything was getting so interesting. And I really hadn't, on the 3rd of June, I actually had the alarm went off one time at 2:21. There seems to be something about that witching hour of 2 to 2:30 that they seem to like. And then after that, we hadn't had any activity at the doors. They never bother the front door, but the back door is, they can actually get up on the porch there. So they seem to like messing with that. Well, the morning of the 6th of June this month, I got up, and my cat house that sits right here in front of the house, you know, I have 2 of them. And the ones that stay right around here in the house, they go into this cat house out here. And I guess I need to send you, I think, Tom, I sent you pictures of that. So you actually have that, you know, where it, you know, you've seen it. So anyway, but I can send you some, Will, too. And I woke up, I don't know, something woke me up. I got up early, and I just happened to look out my bedroom window, and I thought, what is going on with the cat house door? And then I look out there, and I see one of my cats that stays in there overnight sitting on the porch of that cat house. And I thought, well, what the heck? And then I walked over to the window and started looking, and I realized that the door was open about a foot. So, okay. And then I go out and to my shed out here, and we just dummy lock that. I have a padlock that goes on there. We don't anymore. But the padlock was through the house. The door doesn't have, we don't have the keys to that particular shed. It was a shed that my granddaughter had put here, so she forgot, they lost the keys to it. So we never had keys, and I wasn't going to call a locksmith out to put it. It was just easier to change the lock, and we just hadn't done it. So we put a hasp on it, and we put the padlock through the hasp, and it's been working just fine. So, but we kind of gotten lazy, and we're getting to the point that we were just dummy locking that lock. And so something had actually taken that lock and turned it completely around. Now, mind you, that the hook on the padlock was still through the house, so it was still engaged, and the door wasn't open, but the padlock had been opened, but it hadn't been taken off. So I thought, well, you know what? If it was a human trying to get in there, they would have known how to operate that. And I thought, okay. And the door handle on my cat house, it's one of those lever ones. You know, you flip it over, and then there's a lever that goes behind the wood bracing in there, and then it locks it and locks it in place. And the wood's actually what's holding it, you know, in place if you don't engage the locking mechanism in it. Well, Jessica and I decided we're engaging the locking mechanism in both of these. We're going to lock them. And Chuck knows the end of this story because we talked about it, I think, last night. So anyway, the morning of the 7th, I got woke up to the biggest kabang on my corner of my bedroom. I mean, I sat straight up in the bed, just straight up. I was like, what the H was that? And I have a shelf here that I actually have a small wire kennel. I have one cat that has kidney problems, and he has to take a prescription kidney food. And I put his food in there, and I put him in there so he can eat, so the other cats don't get his food. That thing, and it hit the wall, whatever it was, hit the wall so hard, and it had actually halfway pushed that kennel. The vibration had pushed that kennel off. And then I think, Tom, I remember I told you something had fallen off, and I heard a noise, you know, like something fell in my closet there, too, because there's a closet right next to that. And it was actually where it was my extra linens for my bed were stacked up there. And what happened was the vibration had knocked those off, and they had hit I had a picture that was leaning up against the wall in there. I hadn't gotten it framed yet, and I didn't want it. It's a large picture, and it had hit that, and that was what it caused that picture to pop and up and then back against the wall here right behind my bed. So that was the noise I heard in the came out of the closet. So anyway, last night, now I haven't told any of y'all this because this just happened. Okay, I went out cats up last night. No problem, everybody. We went up early because they were predicting a storm that didn't come, and so I was trying to get everybody up 7:30. So it was still twilight. So I got them all. Everybody went up just fine, no problem. I got them in the cat house. Well, I did not lock the door because I could not, for some reason, I couldn't find my key to lock it. You actually have to lock it with a key. It's not, it's not something that you can just, engage. You have to lock it with the key. And I did go over and lock the padlock. Well, guess what? I get up this morning and my cat house door is wide open. Wide open. And I didn't lock it. And I told Jessica, I kept texting Jessica last night, and she came in this morning, and she says, why were you texting? I said, Jessica, I want to tell you something. I was just getting that eerie feeling that something wasn't right around here. And I was going to have, I didn't know if she had her keys, and come to find out she didn't. She actually had left them here because that wouldn't have been something she needed to take to work with her, to lock up the cat house. And she didn't get home last night from work until about, it was probably about 1:15, 1:30, because she had to work late. So I was just like, I just had one of those strange feelings, you know how you get when, well, you guys know exactly what I'm talking about, when that it's just, something's not quite right. And I mean, I must have gone to that freaking back door and checked that and the alarm about 20 times last night. And so anyway, that's the end of the story. But it's gonna be locked tonight.
One thing you mentioned that I want to bring up to people out there listening is the importance of keeping a log of what happens. If you got stuff going on around your property, especially, you want to make notes of what happened, when it happened, the time, who was present, and then document that, because you'll see some patterns. And speaking of patterns, I mentioned that Adam made a documentary that's actually going through viewings right now, so they're going to decide what they're going to do with it and all that. But so that'll be coming out in the near future. But one thing Adam notes in there, when we were in the field doing stuff this last July, and Tom, you've seen it, there were two separate times, 2 separate days where coincidentally at 2:30 a.m. is when we were recording sounds out there in that area. So it goes back to what you just mentioned for us, that 2:30 time frame. That seems to be kind of the golden hour.
Yeah, that's the witching hour, I think.
Yeah.
Boy, it sure was. It really was.
I don't know what they're possibly would be wanting. Well, I say that. I've got 2 garbage cans. When I go get cat food, I have 2 garbage cans, those big metal ones, and I fill them up with cat food. But the lids have been on those. They haven't been off. So I don't know if they smell the cat food in there. But I will say this, that day that on the 6th that I went out there and found it open, all the cat food was gone. Now, I did not check this morning. I just I just opened everything up on the other one, and then Jessica came out and we got to talking, and I actually forgot to go back in there and check the pans to see if they were all still full of cat food. So I don't think an army of raccoons came through the night and cleaned everything out, because the 2 raccoons that I have that are pets, they eat on the back porch and then they go do their thing, you know. So,
Chuck, how about you? You got anything before we wrap this up?
Well, I was going to say there is some kind of correlation with that time frame, and a lot of the times when I've had the best activity and the weirdest stuff happened was around that time frame, 2, 3 o'clock, somewhere around in there. At 3 o'clock, that's when the one was peeking in my window in my pickup down at the big thicket. I mean, I've had numerous times when that time frame has been really, really active, and I don't know what it is. I don't know what drives them for that time frame, but there is a correlation there. There's something to it.
Tracy, how about you?
I have no questions. I just like to tell everybody thank you, and I'm enjoying these shows. It's really interesting listening to you guys talk. I still don't know if I want to get into researching, looking for those, you know, myself.
Right.
Because, like I said, I know they're out there. I can prove it to myself.
I hear you there.
I just like to tell all of you thank you, and I enjoy talking to all of you, each and every one of you. And Tom, I hope that you're feeling a lot better. And you too,
Thank
Chuck.
you.
I'm glad your eyesight's coming back and everything, man. That's good to hear.
Milo, how about you?
Oh, yes, sir. Thanks so much.
How about you, Milo?
Well, you know, I back on that hoax thing, you know, I think a lot of it is just trolling. People just do stuff to get a response out of people, and then, you know, either they deny or agree with it and just get everybody's blood boiling.
Yeah,
So,
that's a good
there
point.
you go.
Tom, how about you?
I just have one quick comment, and that is the takeaway I got from the recent activity with Forrest is basically, in a nutshell, what this thing did is it slapped the side of the house. And gosh, have we ever heard that before?
Just once or twice.
Right. That's exactly what it did. Okay, that's it.
All right, everyone. Thanks for joining us, and you know, stay tuned for tomorrow's show.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Creek Devil. If you or anyone you know has had an encounter with these creatures, please contact us at williamjevning@yahoo.com. That's William, Jevning, @yahoo.com. All communication is confidential. Join us for another program next week. And until then, keep your eyes open out